You drive past it on the way to work. Every day, Sunrise Express Wash, off the 11th Street frontage road in Tulsa, 4 self-service bays and 1 automatic tunnel that hasn't run right since spring. $4 a wash, $8 with the undercarriage rinse. Nobody's ever in there. You've watched it for 3 months without really watching it, the way you notice a stop sign you've driven past 1,000 times. Then one Tuesday, you actually stop. You don't know why that day specifically, you just do. The owner is a man named Walter Briggs, 68, had a knee replaced in January and never got back into the rhythm of being there every day. He wants $620,000. You have $40,000. You don't say anything for a second. You do the math in your head, badly, standing there, and the math doesn't work, not even close, and you know that, and you still ask if you can see the equipment room. Here's the thing about Walter that takes you 4 visits to learn, not 1. The automatic tunnel, the expensive piece, the one that actually makes money, has been down 40% of the time for 2 years because fixing it costs $19,000, and he stopped believing it was worth spending money on a business he was already trying to leave. His daughter lives in Tucson, has a guest house, keeps asking when he's coming. You go home and you don't sleep great. Not panicked, just awake. You pull his last 2 years of bank statements, which he hands over almost too easily, like nobody's asked before. Average self-service revenue, steady, boring, $9,200 a month. Tunnel revenue when it works, another $11,000. Tunnel revenue the months it doesn't, sometimes $2,400. You build a spreadsheet that night at your kitchen table with a glass of water going warm next to you. Fix the tunnel, run both pieces at capacity. The thing could do $26,000 a month, conservatively, maybe more in summer. Walter isn't selling a car wash. He's selling a car wash he gave up on. Those are 2 different assets with 2 very different price tags, and only you seem to have noticed. You call a mechanical contractor who services wash equipment across 3 states. A guy named Pete, semi-retired, does consulting now because, in his words, everybody else in this business just wants to replace stuff instead of fix it. Pete walks the tunnel with you on a Thursday morning, listens to it run for 90 seconds, and tells you the part isn't actually back-ordered anymore. It was 18 months ago, and nobody at Sunrise ever called to check again. $4,300, parts and labor, 2 days of work. You stand there for a second doing nothing, just absorbing how small the actual problem was the whole time. You go back to Walter with a number, $410,000, below his $620,000. He doesn't flinch the way you expect. He just looks tired in a different way, the way someone looks when a thing they've been carrying finally gets set down somewhere. You learn later he'd already quietly lowered his own expectation to $450,000 in his head and was bracing to negotiate down from there. You ask him one question, the same kind of question that works on people like Walter. What does the next 6 months look like for you if you don't sell? He doesn't have an answer. That's the answer. First call is to a local bank that does SBA 7A loans, the kind built for exactly this situation. The loan officer, a woman named Renata, runs the numbers Walter gave you against what the business could do once the tunnel's fixed, and tells you SBA will generally finance up to 90% of a deal like this if the cash flow supports the debt service. You don't get giddy about it. You've seen people get giddy about preliminary numbers and then watch the deal fall apart in underwriting. You just say thank you and ask what she needs next. You go back to Walter and propose he carry $35,000 of the price himself, a seller note, paid over 3 years at a fair rate, secured against the property. For Walter, this isn't charity. It's a way to get more total dollars out of the deal than a straight cash buyer would offer. And it tells the bank he believes in the business enough to stay attached to it a little longer. And Pete is out of state for a job and doesn't call back for 3 days. And you genuinely consider that the whole thing might just quietly die from administrative friction. which is a strange way for something to fail after all that work. But it doesn't die. Pete calls back. The paperwork goes through. You sign on a Wednesday morning in a title company office that smells like burnt coffee. Walter signs 4 minutes before you do, looks up and says, "Take care of Denise." Denise is the attendant who's worked the front counter for 6 years, who Walter never once mentioned by name in any of your conversations until that exact second, like he'd been saving it. Denise finds out she has a new boss the way most employees in deals like this do, which is to say, abruptly, on a Thursday, when you walk in and introduce yourself. She doesn't say much. She's seen owners come through the lot before, she tells you later. You tell her the tunnel's getting fixed next week. She says, "Finally." Not unkindly, just flat. Pete's crew fixes the tunnel on a Tuesday and Wednesday. You're there both days, not because you can do anything useful, but because you want to watch it happen, the way you wanted to watch the bank wire land. Thursday morning it runs a full cycle for the first time in longer than Denise can remember, and a regular customer, an older woman in a Buick, who Denise says comes every single week without exception, drives through it for the first time in 8 months and rolls her window down afterward and says, "Well, look at that." Denise tells you this like it's nothing. It is not nothing. It is the first proof, outside of your spreadsheet, that the thing you built on paper is actually true. Month 1, full capacity, both pieces running, $24,100. Slightly under your projection, mostly because of 2 rainy weeks nobody could have planned around. Month 3, $27,800. The loan payment, fixed, doesn't care about rain. The difference between those two numbers is the entire reason you did this. You still drive the same route to work. You still pass the sign, which still says Sunrise Express Wash, because changing it felt like the kind of move people make when they want credit for something, and you don't especially want credit. Denise still works the counter. The woman in the Buick still comes every Tuesday. Nobody in line knows that the guy who occasionally shows up in jeans, checks the chain drive sound for 90 seconds, and leaves without buying anything is the owner. They assume he works there. You didn't buy a $620,000 car wash. You bought a $410,000 car wash that everyone, including the man who owned it for 11 years, had quietly decided wasn't worth fixing.